Hey hackers, Blue Cosmo from CCS here. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be teaching you a new course, the Introduction to Cybersecurity course, right? You guys can be taking this either on YouTube or the website. The website is better because there are a few more resources. It's easier to learn on there and understand because there's a whole courses page that is structured for you to learn this course. You can also watch it on YouTube, but I definitely suggest checking out the course version or the website version of this course. Cool. So let's go ahead and get started. This is the Introduction to Cybersecurity course created by Blue Cosmo, which is me, and in assistance with System. System is an intern that has been working at the company for a while, and he assisted in developing this curriculum. So many thanks to him. So let's talk a little bit about the synopsis, okay? So this course basically teaches you introductory concepts for cybersecurity, right? It kind of gives you an idea of what cybersecurity career fields you're going to see, what cybersecurity is about, and kind of just give you a good introduction that's going to kind of put you in like a good position to kind of learn some of the other topics that you will see throughout cybersecurity, right? It also prepare you for other courses that are on the CosmodiumCS.com website, or you can also kind of get some more light on cybersecurity itself. So a little bit about who I am. My name is Chris Taylor, also known as Blue Cosmo. My occupation, well, I am the Chief Executive Officer at Cosmodium Cybersecurity. In association with that, I do work as a security educator and malware developer. And most notably, I do, have a YouTube channel, and I do teach and educate on the YouTube channel, which is in association with the Cosmodium CS company. But of course, the social or this PowerPoint will be linked in the description on YouTube, and if you just scroll down on the course page, you'll see the PowerPoint in the notes section. So feel free to check out any of the socials here or anything else if you're trying to get in contact with me or learn a little bit more on who I am. Cool. So start talking about the introductory concept of cybersecurity, right? So security terminology, script kiddie, right? So a script kiddie is basically a term for a hacker who uses scripts that are found online to conduct their hacks. They typically have like little to no skill. They don't really know much about programming, networking. They kind of just know how to run a script that was created by some other hacker or cybersecurity professional online to conduct hacks, right? It's a pretty common term within the security community, and it's something that is good to know, right? The next term is a black hat hacker or black hat. And these are people who hack with malicious intent, right? You see these people all over the news sometimes during the ransomware attacks. Any person who hacks with malicious intent is a black hat hacker, right? We also have the term white hat hacker, and which is basically the opposite, right? It is a cybersecurity professional who hacks for good, right? Hacking isn't this one big thing that can be like only bad. We can use hacking to better security, learn more about vulnerabilities and find those vulnerabilities and fix them before actual black hat hackers do, right? It's a really important job within the white hat hacker space. There are other types of hat hackers, but for the simplicity of this course, black hat and white hat are the only ones we really need to know. So let's talk a little bit more vocab. We have vulnerability, right? Vulnerability is just a weakness in a network system. These are really important because these are what hackers use to exploit in order to get, access or unauthorized access. Right. So they basically exploit these vulnerabilities to their advantage, right? Hacking is basically just gaining unauthorized access. That's all hacking is gaining unauthorized access. And to do that, we need to find some sort of weakness that we can kind of twist to our advantage in order to get access to some sort of unauthorized system, right? So we have two types of threat models. We have the internal threats. Internal threats exist within the organization, or basically any vulnerabilities that exist in the organization, right? So any weaknesses that exist within this organization. This typically revolves around employees or people who pick up like bad USB drives that have some sort of malware on them, right? And exploit the organization, right? It has to exist within the organization. The other type of threat is the external threat, right? External threats, they're basically any vulnerabilities that exist on the publicly accessible parts of the organization. It's pretty simple, right? Any vulnerabilities that exist on the publicly accessible parts of the organization. So anything that we can access publicly, whether it's the website, whether it's a building, anything like that, any any vulnerabilities that exist within that are external threats. Cool. So the next section, we're going to talk about some more vocabulary, right? So we have something called a host. A host is basically a service that can be remotely connected to. I know that sounds complicated, but it's basically like a server, right? A server is just a computer that we can remotely connect to. And a host is basically that computer, right? When we look at it, like if you're ever connecting to your Google Drive, you're basically connecting to that host, right? And you are the client, right? You're basically the user or computer that is connecting to this host. We also have the term target, right? Target is basically whoever or whatever a black hat hacker is targeting, right? Client can also be used within the white hat hacking world as the kind of opposite of the target, right? We're kind of the person that we're hacking in order to help them, and then the target is like the person who they're hacking in order to exploit them, and whatever malintent that is behind there, right? So what is data? Data is nothing but digital information. That's really all it is, right? Data can be personal, right? Meaning that it belongs to one individual. And it also can be organizational, which means it belongs to some sort of organization or company, right? You can see personal data kind of revolves around like medical or employment, education, all that information that is digital that belongs to a single individual. Here's also some examples of organizational data when we look at like other financial types of information, intellectual property, and even confidential property, right? These are all super important parts of data that belong to personal and organizational levels, right? So how is data stored? Well, large sets of data are typically stored in something called databases, right? And they can be stored either locally or remotely. When they're stored locally, it means the user has direct and physical access to their area or to their data, right? It means it's basically on the same network as them, right? So it can be like a hard drive, it can be a USB drive, or it can be any other server that is local to their network, right? Think about all the devices connected to your Wi-Fi, for example, right? Remotely basically means that it's stored on some sort of server outside of their network, right? So it's basically, again, the server is just a computer that we can remotely connect to, right? So if you think of like the cloud, that's kind of how you can store your data remotely. Something like Google Drive, for example, is a very prominent example of remotely storing data. So what is a security breach? It's basically a type of cyber attack where a hacker gains unauthorized access to a system and then leaks that data, right? They can typically sell it, they can hold it for ransom, whatever they choose to do with that data is, I guess, is up to them. But regardless, a security breach is when the hacker gains unauthorized access to that system, right? This leaked data can be very detrimental to organizations, right? Data can be very important. It can be financial, it can have information about their employees. It's data that's not supposed to fall into the wrong hands. And that's just kind of why we have cybersecurity to begin with, is to protect this digital information, right? So what is cybersecurity, right? Cybersecurity is kind of the act of keeping data secure, right? Especially on networked systems. That's kind of the key part, right? Keeping data secure on network systems. That is what cybersecurity really is. White hat hackers, right, but good hackers, need to fight against these cyber attacks in order to keep individuals and organizations secure, right? So that's kind of why cybersecurity is important, right? Companies are trusted with like important pieces of data, and when that trust is broken to keep that data secure, it can cause very big issues. If you've read the Story of Rocky article on the CosmodiumCS.com website, you can get a very good understanding of why cybersecurity is so important in our modern day. If a hacker leaked the passwords of like users to a specific company, it could also ruin the company's new representation, but it could also ruin the digital lives of those clients, because people tend to use repeated passwords, right? If one company gets hacked and they have the same password for their Netflix, that company, and their bank account, all three of those accounts can be exploited now that those passwords were leaked. So that's very kind of unfortunate, but we also can look at how we can move on to the next section, which is cybersecurity careers, all right? So this is the next section of cybersecurity careers, right? Let's talk about the 4 domains of cybersecurity, right? First domain, there is red teaming. Then there's blue teaming, cybercrime and analytics, and development and engineering, right? I'm going to deep dive into all of these 4 domains, but basically all of the kind of things that fall under the world of cybersecurity can fall into one of these 4 categories. All right, cool. So let's talk about the first category, which is red teaming, right? Red teaming is basically white hat hackers who act like black hat hackers, right? They basically will emulate, some sort of like bad hat hacker or black hat hacker and kind of see how, like, if they were the black hat hackers, what they would find, right? And whatever they find, they can kind of fix before an actual black hat hacker would come and exploit some sort of company, right? So the careers that kind of revolve around it are the penetration tester, right? They kind of legally access security company and they'll work with the security at hand to kind of test and see what systems are secure, what systems are not secure. The ethical hacker finds vulnerabilities within clients, and they basically kind of work as if they are like the black hat hacker, right? It's kind of the very dictionary definition of red teaming is the ethical hacker. They're basically getting paid to break into the company, find vulnerabilities as if they were, genuine black hat hackers, right? So for the most part, the company is unaware of their presence other than executive level positions that are giving them permission to break into their company. So we also have some like a web specialist, which would discover vulnerabilities in like web infrastructure, right? So now we're going into the second stage, which is blue teaming, right? Blue teaming is basically security defense, right? Red teaming is like a security offense, while blue teaming is a security defense, right? You're kind of protecting systems from cyber attacks, right? Careers that kind of focus around this are like the network administrator, right? They're kind of responsible for overseeing the network. System administrator, which is kind of responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of computer systems. We also have like the incident responder, which are like the first people to show up in case of a cyber attack. They kind of go up there, analyze the malware or whatever cyber threat is attacking and try to fix the problem as soon as they can. If you're familiar with SOC analysts as well, that's also a very prominent position within blue teaming. Cybercrime and Analytics. It's basically like the security law and kind of using data to understand how hackers think and work so we can kind of protect ourselves against them. So careers that kind of fall around this category are cybercrime investigator, right? They're an investigator or a detective that will kind of assist law enforcement, right? Law enforcement isn't the best at, cybersecurity. They're here to stop criminals that you think of, like criminals like with guns that are robbing banks, breaking and entering. Hackers are, people on computers. It's kind of a whole different level of crime, and cybersecurity or cybercrime investigators kind of specialize within that space to assist law enforcement. They can also work as private investigators as well. We also have the intrusion analysts, right? They kind of analyze the data from an intrusion to kind of see how they entered the network so that way they can fix it and prevent that same thing from happening again, right? Even like things like the network analysts, they're kind of responsible for implementation and upkeep of networks and kind of just analyzing that said data. So here's the next section, right? This is the third section of development. This is the fourth one of development and engineering, right? Development and engineering is pretty common sense, right? It's hackers who develop tools for better security. You can kind of think of malware developers, right? This is a very prominent position within like government agencies, right? Developing malware to attack foreign countries or to test the security of a network or any other job of that such. We also have the security engineer, right? They kind of design and create secure networks. And then we also have a software developer, which kind of develops and create secure software for clients, right? Even like when it comes to a base down software developer, that's a huge prominent position within cybersecurity because we need secure software. Software developers who study cybersecurity will make better software because they can make it more secure. That is just a fact. So now we're entering stage 2, which is how we can start understanding hackers, right? This is a very important section where we will be able to understand how hackers think, how hackers work, and be able to target them better. Cool. So there are 5 stages of a hack. This is from a black hat hacker's perspective, of course, because we are trying to understand how hackers think and work. So the first stage is reconnaissance, right? It's kind of where we gain information on a target. This is easily the most important stage of a hack, reconnaissance. Getting as much information as possible. When you're working in government, you will be performing reconnaissance for several months to get information on a target to make sure that you can successfully analyze, a threat to target them in the most effective ways possible, right? So the next section is scanning and enumeration. This is kind of the process of where we can obtain some sort of blueprint of the network, right? We see what network they're running, what devices they're running, what operating system are running, what devices on the network, how many devices on the network, all this information through scanning and enumeration. Enumeration is kind of finding those vulnerabilities, while scanning is kind of attaining that blueprint. So once we perform that, we can actually gain access, right? It's basically pretty simple, gaining access into a target, right? Target is who or what a black hat hacker is targeting, right? So then once a hacker gains access, they have to maintain access. Basically, we call this persistence, right? Maintaining that access, right? Being able to access your target over and over again, whenever you need to, whenever you want to. And then the last step is to cover your tracks, right? Basically remove your traces, remove the existence of your presence to not raise alarm that you were ever there, right? Those are the 5 steps of the ethical hack, right? Or of a hack. When it comes to the types of attacks that kind of are oriented around this exploitation stage and such, we can see that, black hat hackers use a wide range of cyber attacks, and it kind of depends on the efficiency of each attack, right? What attack should be used when or where, depending on what vulnerabilities are accessible and any other information as to such, right? So an example of online attacks are basically done an example of online attacks are things like phishing, malware, cracking, and exploitation, right? Online attacks are basically done digitally without any local access, right? They're all pretty much remote, and they are done online, right? And I'll explain what all of these are shortly, right? So let's go ahead and talk about phishing. Phishing is basically when a attacker sends fraudulent emails or messages to someone to try to get information off of them, right? I'm sure this may have happened to you plenty of times before, where you'll get fake emails from Amazon people will try to scam you, right? In order to gain credentials or information or any other type of data that they can receive from you, right? An example of this is a hacker can set up a fake login portal in which he has control of all the traffic going in and out, right? So if you were to sign into this portal, then he would be able to grab your credentials, right? Let's talk about malware for a little bit, right? Malware is a piece of software that is designed to cause disruption and gain knowledge, right? When we look at malware, we can kind of think of a piece of code that would steal, credentials off of your web browser, right? Because your web browser typically saves your passwords locally to your machine, and specific pieces of malware can actually exfiltrate all that data and gain your usernames and passwords. Cracking is kind of like the process of using a series of patterns to gain access into a system, right? An example of this would be like a brute force attack, where we have a list of passwords, like the top 200 most common passwords, and we run it against some sort of website or login page, right? And we're basically trying to get into this one account with every single password possible, or the most common passwords, to see if you can get access to that account. Lastly, we're going to talk about some exploitation, right? Exploitation is kind of when the hacker finds vulnerabilities and will kind of use those vulnerabilities and kind of exploit them to kind of gain control over that target, right? An example of this is how an attacker can find out that you have some sort of outdated service on your system that is vulnerable to some sort of exploit, right? Then they can exploit this and gain access to your system, right? This is why reconnaissance is so important, because we can see what services they're running. And if we find out, hey, they're running Chrome 79, then you can say, oh, Chrome 79 has this vulnerability where they store these passwords in plain text, and you can exfiltrate those passwords, right? But if they're running Chrome 80, then you can say, oh, okay, well, we can't use that exploit. Let's look at it some other type of exploit, right? That's kind of the key importance behind reconnaissance. Cool. We also have physical attacks, right? Physical attacks are kind of done by the hacker, typically with the help of some sort of hardware or USB device. The hacker can kind of use these devices to kind of get information or kind of exploit a certain target, right? Human interface device is kind of like any device that humans kind of interact with, things like a keyboard, right? You may have heard of the USB rubber ducky before. We do have a course for the USB rubber ducky, and it's basically a tool on how that can inject keystrokes into a computer. It's pretty cool. Definitely suggest checking out our course on our website. But examples of this are like, again, the USB rubber ducky, right? It kind of acts like a keyboard and it can inject keystrokes. Basically anything your keyboard can do, this thing can do, right? But yeah, so let's talk about some wireless attacks. Wireless attacks are kind of essential for hackers because it allows them to exploit like a target without needing physical access. It kind of goes with the same thing for online attacks as well, right? Wi-Fi attacks. If you kind of look at the evil twin attack, very familiar with the Wi-Fi pineapple. It's basically like a fake Wi-Fi access point to mislead people, and we can kind of use that information to like gain credentials, for example, with a fake login page or anything of that sort. We also have things like Bluetooth attacks, right? Like blue snarfing is an attack that will let the attacker have full access to a person's phone by using a vulnerability of Bluetooth, right? So if we see what type of Bluetooth version that they're running, we can see if they're vulnerable to this attack, right? Again, falling back to the concept of reconnaissance. So let's talk about DOS attacks, or denial of service attacks, right? DOS attack is basically a cyber attack where a hacker can overwhelm the traffic to a specific host, right? And any of the clients that are connected to that host can no longer reach the host, right? Because we're just overwhelming the traffic, right? If we have several, like hundreds of computers all like filling up the traffic to this one host, then it would prevent any other users from accessing that website or host. So then we have a DDoS, right? A DDoS attack, which you may have heard of before as well. It's basically a DOS attack that is distributed, right? So there are multiple clients that will overwhelm the host target, right? This can make it harder to identify because it means that there are more clients that are targeting, or there's more clients targeting this one host, right? And basically these targets will be infected by a hacker to perform the attack for him, right? So let's say if there are like 3 users connected to this website, a hacker can basically use some sort of malware, get that malware onto those other 3 clients or targets in this case, and have that malware start targeting this host too. So it forces their computers to target this host. And this kind of collection of infected clients are referred to as a botnet. So if you ever heard the term botnet before, that's kind of what it is. So let's talk about social engineering attacks. You may have heard of this before, especially in the red teaming area. They're basically attacks of hacking people, right? You exploit the internal vulnerabilities of an organization, right? We're not talking about internal and external, but you do this by hacking the employees, right? Basically lying to them, getting information off of them, right? So lying, pretending to be someone that you aren't, exploiting human emotion of some sort or anything like that. All is revolved around the social engineering attack. Now we can start talking about cryptography. So what is cryptography? Well, it is the study and practice of secure communications. Well, basically, if you have taken the other cryptography courses on the website, you may be familiar with these concepts already, but we do quickly have to go over them in order to clarify the topic of ransomware when we get to it, right? So cryptography does protect your digital life and kind of like digital information from unauthorized users, right? Those unauthorized users or viewers are basically, hackers, right? So cryptography allows basically computers to validate the authenticity of a user. Also allows you to protect your financial information and protect your emails and cloud storage, right? It's also why we need passwords to access certain services to begin with. How can we actually secure communications? Well, we have encryption. Encryption is basically the process of turning readable information that we call plain text into unreadable information that we call ciphertext, right? If we look at this image, we have this readable information, right? You can clearly see that it says the letter A and the letter A. One is uppercase and one is lowercase. That is the plain text. We are turning it into unreadable information. If you look at this, you don't know what that says. It's unreadable. It is ciphertext. And encryption is the process of turning this into this. The opposite of this is decryption, right? We're basically taking that ciphertext and turning it back into plain text. So we have our ciphertext here, which is our unreadable information, and we're simply turning it back into plain text. A cipher is basically the algorithm that encrypts a plain text, that encrypts plain text or decrypts ciphertext using some sort of key. A key is basically a secretive set of characters that are used for the ciphering process. And if you want to learn a little bit more about cryptography, we do have 2 courses, I think, covering cryptography on our website. So definitely feel free to check those out if you want. So let's start talking about ransomware, right? Ransomware is basically malicious code, right? Some sort of malware. But it uses cryptographic practices to kind of encrypt the target's database, right? A database is just that mass storage of data or digital information, right? But basically, this malicious code encrypts all that data so it becomes unreadable. So a black hat hacker can hold onto a target's data for ransom because the company at hand or the organization at hand doesn't know what key they need to use in order to decrypt it, right? So this black hat can hold it for ransom, exchanging money or some sort of other valuable item for that key in order to decrypt the data. As I said before, cryptography is a very important topic in the world of cybersecurity. And if you want to listen or learn more about cryptography, I do have the cryptography course that we have right here. We do have another cryptography course, which is for more advanced people. So if you feel as if you want to learn a little bit more advanced cryptography, you can also check out the website. So let's talk about malware, stage 4 malware. And let's actually, start getting more familiar with what malware is, right? So what is malware? Malware is basically malicious software, right? Software that black hat hackers use to exploit some sort of target. There are many different types of malware, and I'm just going to give you some examples on the most common. So first we have a virus. You've probably heard this before if you have antivirus. It's basically a piece of software that is designed to self-replicate and often attaches itself to another program, so the user will run it without any suspicion, right? A Trojan is kind of like malware that is disguised as another program, right? So while a virus is kind of there present, but it'll start attaching itself, Trojan's already attached to a program. It kind of just looks like something else, right? So if you have like a Google Doc, or like a Microsoft Word document, there could be malware embedded into it of some sort, or like a PDF or something like that. They can, or the Trojan can kind of take control over your entire system, and it kind of, can cause a lot of damage to your computer and such. A worm is one of my favorite pieces of malware. It is basically autonomous malware, right? It's self-oriented and it self-replicates and spreads, which is one of the coolest things about worms, right? I hate to say cool because I know worms can be very dangerous, but I'm a nerd, so this stuff is cool to me. But yeah, so worms are like, as opposed to a virus where it needs to be ran, worms are like searching through the network and they're targeting computers. They're spreading that they don't need to be run by the client or the target, which is really cool. So worms will often spread through networks or emails or any other type of protocols to reach other computers and spread. A rootkit is basically a type of malware that modifies the configurations of the operating system and kind of create administrative accounts, and also allow us to create some sort of thing called a backdoor. Backdoor is basically a way for a black hat hacker to remotely access a computer, right? How you kind of have a client and host. It's like an unauthorized version of a hacker being the client and the host being the target. So let's talk about spyware. Spyware is another type of malware, but basically it infects your device and collects information off of you, right? So it can take pictures to your webcam, it'll look at the websites you visit, any passwords you type in, lock your keystrokes, all of that, right? So that's about malware, and we're going to start talking about security detection and prevention, right? So antivirus is also referred to as AV, right? Is a piece of software that kind of removes and blocks unwanted software programs, right? If you look at malware or viruses, that's what antivirus is there. It's a piece of software that's trying to protect your computer from those programs, right? Antivirus can be really great and strong sometimes, but other times can be weak, right? Which is why cybersecurity is so important, so that way we can keep updating these pieces of software to make them more secure and prevent other types of malware. We can also have our ways to detect malware. Sometimes malware can be a hard form of computer systems or like AV to detect, right? Here are some common ways that we can actually tell if malware it does exist on some sort of compromised network or device. So if there are any new, modified, or deleted files, this is one of the key fundamental ways to discover if there's some sort of malware on your computer. I know some YouTube creator, I forgot his name, RWX Rob, I believe, created some sort of software called NARC to detect new, modified, and deleted files on Linux. It's pretty cool. Definitely suggest checking it out if I can find it. But we also have things like slower computer speeds, right? Malware can be kind of working through the random access memory or RAM of the computer and slow down your computer or CPU. You might also have internet connectivity issues as well, or anything like that, right? Then we have firewalls. Firewalls are basically a way to filter these communications on the network, right? Firewalls can prevent like certain devices from accessing certain websites, right? So if we have a piece of malware that is trying to download malware off of a website so that we can keep spreading and adding on to the already pre-existing malware on the computer, it won't be able to because that firewall is preventing the computer from accessing those websites, right? We can have firewalls have a whitelist where it can only access certain websites, or a blacklist where we can ban certain websites, right? So, yeah. Let's actually talk about a little bit of what is pen testing. You may have saw the job title in the red team section called penetration tester. So we can actually talk a little bit about what pen testing actually is. So pen testing actually stands for penetration testing, and it is basically the tackling of a certain target with black hat techniques, right? And it is kind of looking for the vulnerabilities of that target to protect it. And it's kind of how we can catch like any vulnerabilities within the system before black hat hackers do. So it's kind of very important. It's like we can pretend to be the black hat hacker. We can find any vulnerabilities that exist within a system and stop them from being exploited, because we will discover them before black hat hackers discover them. So of course this is being done in a secure way, and it shouldn't ever affect or damage the target in any way, shape, or form. Pen testing is a way to help the company and secure it through hacking. We are not actually, hackers who would do anything to break and enter and leave damaged systems on the network. So in conclusion, we can kind of see there's a lot that goes into cybersecurity, right? These are very basic and mere and introductory concepts to the world of cybersecurity. However, this course should kind of prepare you for the other courses within Cosmodium. So yes, it's a very introductory course. A lot of the other courses on our website are a little bit more difficult, a little bit harder to learn, and provide a lot more information. But this should be a good first and introductory concept, of course, if you are just getting into the theme. Make sure to leave a like on this course, or check out some of the other courses we do have on the Cosmodium CS website. But regardless, I will see you guys next time. So stay happy, stay positive, and as always, happy hacking.